And now let me just play you the whole thing all the way through, and then well done, well done. You have made it through this, very jam-packed tutorial. So, hello and welcome to the next in the series of How to Jazz Up Classical Music. This is actually, I think, about the fourth time that I've tried recording this. I've spent so much time trying to go into this. So basically what we're doing, the last session, you don't have to have watched it, but it will help. But you don't have to have watched it. So in the last session, the first session, we basically looked at how to take an existing chord sequence in classical music. We did 5-2-5. You can look at it if you want to brush up on it. And basically it was about taking an existing chord sequence and changing it and adding to it, sort of changing it in some way, the fundamental chords. What we're going to do today in this session is we're going to keep the chords actually as they are. We're going to keep the fundamental flavors. So we're still doing Fur Elise, by the way. So before it was A minor, we're going to have an A minor of some kind. Then it went into really to an E dominant seventh. We're going to keep the E dominant seventh flavor, and then we're going to keep the A minor flavor, and we're going to do this basically the whole way through the first few bars. Just keeping all of the exact flavors of chords, but we're going to change what are called the extensions and alterations and things similar to that. So basically, I like to do really juicy chord substitutions, like to completely change the chords. But if we're going to start to get comfortable with doing that, we need to know how to start adding a whole load of extra notes, like the 9s, the 11s, the 13s, understand why we have 9s, 11s and 13s, why they're not just called 2, 4 and 6, understand a little bit more about 7th chords, and just basically understand the juicier types of chords and the way that we can colour them in jazz. So another reason why, one of the reasons why this is now, I think, the fourth time I've been recording this, I just keep hitting things that I've realised. I watch it back and I go, oh my God, Bob, this just isn't clear at all. This is chaos. And the problem is that jazz theory really is like the Wild West. It's not like classical music theory, where over hundreds of years people have standardized it and classical musicians have reached an agreement, a consensus on what theory is. I'm afraid that the jazz theory is used really differently by different people, and especially I think for people who come from a classical background or have kind of a particular mindset where they just go, what is the definitive answer? I think I see a lot on the internet. People go, I want to know, what is this in jazz theory? Please give me a definitive answer. And there is no definitive answer because, sometimes I spend too much time on Facebook groups arguing or watching arguments where people are arguing about jazz theory, and people get really entrenched in this. And from my perspective, I think that jazz theory is useful when you look at how people use it in the real world context. Not like what do the rules say, but how do people use it in the real world and what do they use it for? And I like to think that I'm one of the people who has like a real world understanding of what the stuff is, not just this is what it says in the book. So I'll talk about some of these controversies, and I'll try not to go too deeply into them, but I will need to talk about them because, what I'll try and do, there are certain things that I do in jazz theory that are mainstream, and then there are certain things that I do which I do slightly differently because I just think, well, surely this is the best way. Whatever I'm doing, I will let you guys know whichever one it is. So also, this particular arrangement, and you are free to download the PDF. I'm supplying the PDF for free of this particular arrangement. I've written this specifically for this tutorial, and I've already simplified it down twice from a previous one that I was doing that was just kind of immediately too complicated. So I'm starting quite simple, and I'm basically putting in very particular chords in a very particular order to kind of, as gently as I can, ease people into some of the more complicated jazz theory. Now, I've written here, it's extension and alteration fundamentals. Fundamentals might make it sound like it's easy. The problem is, like I said, there's a lot of things here that people don't have agreement about. Because people don't have agreement about it, to the ear it's simple, but when we try and understand it, it might not feel like a fundamental because there's just so many different ways that people look at it. Anyway, I will try and keep all of this stuff simple. I know I ramble and talk too much at the beginning of these things, so I'll try and get on with it now. But basically, do not worry about how you write this particular arrangement. The goal of this tutorial isn't how you write it. The goal is to understand what the chords are, understand what we call them, and just understand a little bit more about what kind of chords we use in jazz. Do not worry about how you write this. That's for future tutorials. So, why do we have numbers above 8? There's several reasons for this. One reason that I like that some people actually kind of don't follow, and I think the people who don't follow this tend to work a bit more with, on the pop rock side of things. But for me, and I really like this as a framework. The 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7. They are basically your shell. Now, in the last session, I was talking about shells and how you play shells, and I was saying that when you play shells on the piano, you generally try and leave the 5 out whenever you can. So in this context, when we're talking about these numbers, think of 1, 3, 5, and 7 as the shell. But the reason why we leave the 5 out is that just a lot of the time, we just don't need it. We hear the 5 even when we don't play it. So for example, here is a C major 7 shell without the 5. And here it is with the 5. And here it is without the 5. With the 5. Without the 5. There's just not really a huge difference. I'll do the same thing with the minor 7th shell. Minor 7th shell without the 5. With the 5. Without the 5. With the 5. So the 5 really is part of the shell. It's just that it's an unnecessary texture when we're playing on the piano. So my rule is that if you play it without and you play it with and you can barely hear the difference, leave it out. As I also explained in the arrangement I made last time, there were occasions where I thought, no, now I can hear the difference when I put the 5 in. If you can hear the difference and you want it, put it in. But if you can't really hear much of a difference, leave it out. But fundamentally, the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7 give you your shell, because this tells you what kind of 7th chord you have. So let me very quickly run through some of them. Here is a major 7 shell. Here is a minor 7 shell. I'm leaving the 5s out for those. Here is a dominant 7 shell. It's got no 5. And here is a half diminished shell. So we've got the 1, the flat 5, the flat 7, the flat 3. This is a half diminished shell. We can have a full diminished shell if we have 1 flat 5, double flat 7, and then we have a flat 3. So you can see that the kind of qualities that the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7 give you your fundamental type of 7th chord. In jazz, it's all about the 7th chords. There's also a chord that I'm introducing this time that we didn't do last time, which is it's going to be a 1, a 7, and a flat 3. This is a minor major 7. I'll explain these later. Students get really put off by minor major together, but I'll explain that later. So yes, 1, 3, 5, and 7 are the basic flavour of 7th chord. So rather than think about the 2, the 4, the 6, what jazz, one reason, not the only reason, but one reason why jazz people like to then talk about 9ths, 11ths and 13ths is that these are flavours, these are colours, these are it's a little bit of seasoning that you put on the chord. So for example, let's say that we have a dominant seventh shell, 1, flat 7 and the 3. So this, and basically when you have these shells, you could pretty much play absolutely almost any piece of jazz only using the notes in the shell, and you could recognize what the jazz piece is. You could almost just play it. No one, you know, a lot of people wouldn't even notice. So the 9th, the 11th and the 13th, they're just extra little bits of flavour. Imagine that you're cooking. The 1, the 3, the 5 and the 7, they're your vegetables and your meat, and you know the raw, the most important stuff, and then the 9, the 11 and the 13th, they're herbs, they're spices, you know, it doesn't fundamentally change it, but it just makes it that much tastier. So anyway, let's say that we've got our 1, flat 7 and 3, we've got our dominant 7 shell. We can add the 9th, so the 9th here, so we're in the key of C, C, B flat, E. Now we can add the 9th, which is D. And it doesn't really fundamentally change the kind of chord. You can leave the 9 out, you can add it. It hasn't really changed it a lot, but it's just made it that little bit sweeter. You can alter the 9 as well. You can have a flat 9. That definitely adds a bit more, but it hasn't fundamentally changed that it's a dominant 7. So dominant 7th with a flat 9. Ooh, that's so much tastier, but it hasn't fundamentally changed the chord. So you know, it's the same thing that if I want to add a 13th and the 9th, so here's a C dominant 7 shell. I can add the 13th, I can add the 9th. Ah, that's so tasty, such a tasty chord, but it's still, you know, fundamentally a dominant 7th chord. You could play without those notes and you still are going to recognise what harmonically is going on. So that is one reason. So let's start having a look at this arrangement. We've got now, instead of just having an A minor chord, we've got the 1 and the 5 in the left hand, and then the flat 3, the 5 and the 1. And for this particular lesson, ignore what I said about how you construct shells with the 1 and the type of 7 in the left hand and the 3 in the right hand. That was how you start doing arranging. Now this, don't worry about how you do it. This is just basically to illustrate more different kinds of chord types. So the first chord is not a 7th. It doesn't have a 7th in it. It doesn't have a G of some kind. But what I've done is I've put the 4th degree of the scale in, which is a D. So it's quite scrunchy, and in the right hand you've got this nice little cluster of C, D, E. And the reason why I've put add 11 is because the 11 is a spice. We've got our fundamental triad, and then we've added this 11th. So, you know, there's an awful lot of controversy that a lot of people would want to call this an add 4. Now, some people will argue that the numbers above 8 means that they go the octave higher. I do not think this is useful. So, like, for example, you know, like internet authorities such as Rick Beato, where I was watching this video last night, argue strongly that this is going to be an add 4, and that if you then do something like this, would be an add 11. Now, I think that if you're talking about the difference between add 4 and add 11, it makes a difference if you're talking about simple pop and rock arrangements, in which case real world musicians actually kind of might play those differently. And we're going to go, hopefully, quite quickly onto quite advanced jazz. When you move on to quite advanced jazz, this whole system of having numbers above 8 being in the octave higher just completely falls apart. Now, I don't really want to go down the rabbit hole and spend ages explaining this. I'm already concerned how much time I have left in this particular one to get through the piece. So maybe just for the moment, take my word for it that if we're going to move on to quite sophisticated, complicated jazz harmonies, add 11, add any numbers above 8, does not mean that you go the octave higher. They can be anywhere. They can be anywhere in your voicing. Now, I'm going to use the word voicing a lot. If you're not sure what the word voicing means, go back and listen to the session. There was the first session before this one. So, it would have just been a totally boring normal triad, but I added the add 11 here. Nice jazz texture. Now here, dominant sevenths have basically an unresolved quality. If we just went to an E dominant 7, it wants to resolve. You can feel, you couldn't just do this. This is E dominant 7, the end. That clearly cannot be the end. It has to go back to the tonic being the chord based on the first degree of the scale. Sus basically, if you have sus2, sus4, sus, the word sus basically means there is no 3. There's no third degree of the scale, which means you don't know if it's major or if it's minor, which gives it a little bit of an unsettled quality. Now, I could go into a massive rabbit hole about Bach and the way that he used suspensions and why we call them suspensions and prepared suspensions, and I'm going to not go into it too much other than to say that in suspensions, in pop, rock, jazz, you have either the 4th degree of the scale waiting to resolve to the 3, or you've got the 2 waiting to resolve to the 3. Now here, what I've written here, E sus, this is maybe most people, maybe more than half of jazz musicians, when they see sus, assume that it means sus4. It's very often the shorthand for sus4. So if we were looking at C, here is the C major triad. Here is C sus4. It's basically C, F and G. You probably recognise that sound from pop music. The 4, the F, is waiting to resolve to the E, and in pop music sometimes can just sit there. In classical music you could never just leave it like that, but in pop it can just sit there as kind of a texture in its own right. Now, the way that I use when it just says sus is, to me, when I see sus, it implies sus4 and sus2. It means, so if we use our example in C major, instead of C major triad, you would have the sus2, which is the D, and the sus4 together. So we've got C, D, F and G. You've got the 1, the 2, the 4 and the 5. Now, to me, I personally call that sus because it's a lot easier than just calling it sus2, sus4. That's really long-winded to me. So sus to me means there is a 2 and a 4 with no 3. Just bear in mind that to some people that just means that there's a 4. Anyway, so what I've done here is in the left hand has the sus4 of E sus4, and the right hand has the E sus2. And then together they give a sort of unsettled quality, which you'll hear if I put it together from the beginning. A minor add 11, lovely. And then it just gives it this kind of floating. It hasn't resolved. It's waiting to go somewhere, rather than just an E major. So. Personally, when I'm composing, arranging jazz, I like loads of 7th chords everywhere because it just makes everything more sophisticated, and not only 7ths but 9ths, 13ths, so I'll come to that later. When you just use these kinds of chords, which is just like minor add 11, sus, these tend to be things that are sort of a little bit more in the rock pop realm. Most people find them easier to listen to. You start to find that when you go into the kind of stuff, do check out my jazz arrangements on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description below, possibly up here as well for you to click on. They are quite complicated, and they're not for everybody. The more complicated, the more spices and seasoning you put on everything, the more people go, that's just too many notes for me. I love it that way. but if you want to make music that's a little bit more accessible, you probably want to stick more and more at this end of things, just maybe without so many 7ths and extensions. Anyway, so A minor add 11, E sus, and then what I've put here, I've then resolved it to the dominant but I've put a B at the bottom. So what this basically means, and then basically when you have a slash, this is E7 or E dominant 7, as I'd like to make my beginner students call it. You know, I'm allowed to call it E7 because I know in my head I assume it's dominant. but when you're calling them things, do get used to seeing E7 and thinking E dominant 7. And please forgive me when I just go E7 because in my head I know it's an E dominant 7th. E dominant 7 / B means that you can have all of the E dominant 7th, but B is the note in the bass. It's the note right at the bottom. So basically we could have all kinds of inversions in the right hand. So I'm going to play a closed voicing again. If you're not sure what that means, go back and listen to the previous video. Here is a closed voicing root position, E dominant 7 in my right hand. E, G sharp, B, and D. So 1, 3, 5, flat 7. This is a root position, closed voicing in the right hand, E dominant 7th. The moment I put a B in the left hand, and this applies to classical theory as well, because I think not everyone is up to speed on this. Even though my right hand is playing a root position, dominant 7th, the moment I put the 5th in the left hand at the bottom, it is now in second inversion. Root with an E at the bottom, first inversion, G sharp at the bottom, second inversion, B at the bottom, third inversion, D at the bottom. It doesn't matter that the right hand is still in root position. It always goes by the note in the bass. So, some of the more observant amongst you might notice that there actually isn't an E where it says E7, but it's so strongly implied. If we go and then here, it's so strongly implied. And if I put the E in the bass, you'll hear that this absolutely is what the chord is. I will in a different video talk about how we can intuitively and in terms of theory be able to work out what chords are when the root is not in the bass, because this is a huge weakness in a lot of my students. I think because you have to kind of use your ear a lot to know these kinds of things. Anyway, moving on. So we've got E dominant 7. If we add the E, it definitely sounds like an E dominant 7 with B in the bass. Now here, this is a new type of chord, and sometimes this confuses people. So we can have the 6th degree of the scale instead of the 7th degree of the scale. So I keep bringing things back into C major because we're just using all the white notes. The white notes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's say that we're familiar with a C major 7th closed voicing in the right hand. 1, 3, 5, 7. A very common thing in jazz is when we're sitting on the 1, which is major, sometimes this gap between the 7 and the 1, it's a little bit, it has a little, quite a lot of tension. So we take the 7 and we move it down to the 6. So now we have 1, 3, 5, 6. This is C major 6 or C6. I might not have mentioned this the last time. I think I did mention this, but if we just refer to a chord by calling it just something like C, major is implied. So C, major implied. Play E flat. The chord of E flat, it's very strongly implied that it is major. I think in classical, it's more expected that you have to say major or minor. In rock, pop, jazz, classical, in rock, pop or jazz, when you just say a letter name, it's implied that it's major. So, C6 or C major 6 if you want to be really specific, but C6 is the 1, the 3, the 5 and the 6. Now if we have a minor triad, so if we've got C minor and we add the normal 6, so this is C, E flat, G and A, this is 1, flat 3, 5 and 6, this is a C minor 6. So it's not a C with a minor 6th. The 6 isn't minor, it's a minor triad, it's C minor with a 6, with a normal 6, because this can trip people up, so C minor 6. So, In bar 4, we have A minor 6. 1, flat 3, 5, a normal major 6. If we were in A major, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got 1, flat 3, 5, 6, and then the melody on top. So from the beginning, E sus. E dominant 7 with B in the bass, or E7/B, then A minor 6. Sounds very nice, that. Nice and simple. Now, here we start to get a little bit more complicated. So, I said before that there were more than one reasons why we use numbers above 8. Now, one of the main reasons, in fact, I would say the main reason why jazz musicians use the numbers above 8 is whenever you see a chord and then a number above 7, above 8, it absolutely means that there is a 7th chord underneath it. So when we see here A minor 9, it means there is an A minor 7th chord. There is an A minor 7th chord with a 9th on top. By the way, I should have said this at the beginning, but I get all my students to memorize this, and it upsets some of my more mathematically minded students. You must remember this formula: 9 equals 2, 11 equals 4, 13 equals 6. 9 equals 2, 11 equals 4, 13 equals 6. Write it down, have it in front of you. I am also giving away a crib sheet. It's similar to the crib sheet I gave away in the last session, but I've added all the stuff that you're going to need from this lesson. I've added everything that we're covering in this lesson. So on page 2, in giant writing at the top, 9 equals 2, 11 equals 4, 13 equals 6. So every time for classical musicians, and you know, I did this for a long time. The moment someone mentions, 9, it's like, that's 2. The moment someone mentions 11, oh, that's 4. The moment someone mentions 13, that's 6. It's really useful, especially for classical musicians. So we have in the left hand the 1 and the flat 7. And then we have the flat 3, so we have our minor 7 shell, we've got the melody on top, so that's our minor 7 shell, and we've added the 9th right next to the flat 3. And it doesn't have to be in the octave higher, despite what a lot of people are going to say on Facebook and forum threads. As we progress through the theory, you really will understand why this is so important. So if we have a dominant chord, if we see something that said A9, that is basically an A dominant 9th, which means that there is a dominant 7th chord. If we see A major 9, that means there is a major 7th chord underneath it. Now, if you look at the crib sheet, I've put all of these chords in C major. You can look at these, hopefully all should become clear if you spend a bit of time with this. And also, if I'm going too quickly, you can slow YouTube down. You can look in the settings, you can slow it down to 3/4, half. I will speak very slowly like this. Or you can just, pause it, take notes, rewind. You don't have to just keep up with everything as I'm throwing it at you. Anyway, so we've got as far as A minor at 11, E sus, E dominant 7/B, A minor 6, and then A minor 9th, and then we are keeping a similar kind of chord. Now, I've really ummed and ahed about this, but fundamentally, what slash chords are, and I think I've demonstrated this in the crib sheet. Let's say that you've got a C closed voicing major triad in the right hand, C, E, G, 1, 3, 5, and you put a D in the bass. That would be called C/D. Now, it would be tempting, and there were times in this arrangement, this is why I've sort of got myself into a bit of a pickle and had to keep re-recording it, because really, a lot of the time when we are writing jazz down and writing chord symbols down, it's really an art form. It's just what we feel like. it doesn't have to be correct, you know, but because I'm doing this tutorial, I'm thinking I don't want to confuse people. I want to be as correct as is possible. But at the end of the day, it actually kind of really doesn't matter like it matters with classical. What matters is what it sounds like, and what matters is more of our intuitive understanding of everything that's going on. But a lot of my students want to kind of know, what am I supposed to write here? So, given this example of C/D, what is going on here in the third quaver of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the sixth bar? So, because the reason why I'm not calling this an A minor 9 and I've called it an A minor add 9 is that if we take the bottom note out, this is now, there's no seventh in it anymore. So the note at the bottom kind of is the seventh, but without that note at the bottom, it's now just a minor add 9. So we've got the 5, the 1, the 9, the flat 3, the 5, and the 1, which is the melody at the top. So it's an A minor add 9 with a G at the bottom. Now, sometimes you'll get chord progressions like this. You will get a chord progression which is an A minor slash G sharp, A minor slash G, A minor slash F sharp. And so for that reason here, I was calling it an A minor 9 slash G, but then I thought, no, that's not what it is. I mean, it doesn't actually really matter, to be quite honest, but I just wanted to be really clear in the nomenclature of all of this kind of stuff. So it's an A minor add 9, and then the G is at the bottom. And then we slide down to this chord, and I'm going to talk about this chord in a minute because I think that my phone is about to run out of its 35 minutes of allotted time before it throws a wobbly, so I'm just going to briefly pause it and then splice it on. So I will see you in a minute. Okay, and so I'm back. I'd better set my timer. Right, so I'm back. E sus7 flat 9. This was another one where when I recorded it really late last night, I was like, oh my god, I hadn't put that there's a seventh, I just call it a sus. Anyway, so in the left hand, we've got the seventh shell, the 1 and the flat 7. In the right hand, we do not have a G of any kind. What we have is a kind of 2, but the 2 has been flattened. And this is actually kind of a complicated one to decide what to call it. It really very easily could have been an E sus7 flat 2. I don't know how much of a rabbit hole to go down with that bit, because basically, yeah, if there's no 3, we are kind of expecting there to be a 2 or a 4. This very easily could have been a flat 2. One of the reasons why I didn't call it a flat 2 was because Sibelius that I used to make all this music nicely formatted wouldn't let me put a flat 2 unless I jumped through a few hoops. so I thought, okay, flat 9, but there are other reasons as well to do with the kind of scale that you use that you would use underneath to solo over this. It's a real rabbit hole. But basically, you've got the 1, flat 7 at 1, a 5, and then you have this note here that could either be thought of as a flat 2 or a flat 9. And this is one of those instances where just, oh my god, just don't worry about it. To be honest, it's not a chord that comes up a lot. It doesn't come up that often. What I was trying to do was not use a load of chords that used 9ths, 11ths, 13ths all stacked and loads of alterations. I was trying to keep it simple. That's why we've got this sort of it's basically just a 1, flat 7, 1, flat 2 or flat 9 and a 5. So from the beginning, A minor add 11, E sus, E7 slash B, a dominant 7, A minor 6th, A minor 9, A minor add 9 slash G, E sus 7 flat 9, and then we have this very interesting chord. Love this chord. E dominant 7 or E7 sharp 9. So this is a really interesting chord because really the way that most beginners prefer to think about this chord is that it has a minor third and a major third, or like a flat 3 and a 3. There are really, really good reasons why jazz people prefer to think of it as a sharp 9 and a 3 rather than as a flat 3 and a 3. I'm going to try not to get drawn into it too much. So guitarists know this chord, this dominant 7 sharp 9, as the Hendrix chord. Here we've got the 3, so the 3 is the G sharp, and then we have the G natural at the top, or an F double sharp, if you want to think of it that way. Lovely chord. Usually when you see a dominant 7 sharp 9, the 3 goes an octave below the what you might want to think of as the minor third or the sharp 9. Usually that way around, but here doesn't always work, but I've put the sharp 9 and the 3 right next to each other. So lovely chord, absolutely love that chord. And again, you've got this 1 and the flat 7 shell in the left hand, you've got the 3 shell in the right hand, and then I've basically just added the sharp 9 and you've got your melody note. By the way, a lot of the time the melody note, I'm just ignoring it, because if we started factoring in the melody note, we'd need to start adding more extensions. Just ignore the melody note for a lot of these, like there, just ignore it. So the C, I'm ignoring it. And then here we have another type of chord, which I was trying to explain yesterday, and trying to explain why it's called A minor 6/9, why it's not called 6/2, why it's not called 13/2, 13/9. Oh my god, it's just this is just what jazz people call it. And basically, if you want to think of it this way, imagine that we don't have the F sharp in the left hand. If we didn't have the F sharp in the left hand, and let's say that you don't have the B either. You've just got A, the 1, the flat 3, the 5, and the 1. Just an absolutely normal triad. Then, if we add the F sharp, that is plainly A minor 6. I hope that you guys see that as A minor 6. We have a 1 at both ends. We've got a flat 3, we've got a 5, and we've got a 6. That is an A minor 6. That is absolutely what it's called. Now if we then add the B, that's now an extra spice. So I think this is why this is called an A minor 6/9. And here is where every jazz person pretty much is going to call it that. They're not going to call it an A minor 6 add 2. No one's going to call it that. It's just everyone calls this an A minor 6/9. Doesn't matter where that B is. It doesn't matter what octave it's in. It will always be called A minor 6/9. Anyway, so moving on. Here is that new chord. Sorry. And then this is a new chord I added since yesterday. So half diminished, and then I think that half diminished 9th. I personally wouldn't use that. Sibelius tried to force me to use it, and then I've put in brackets what I would prefer to call it. So, I mean, I suppose, given that you've got A minor 9, A major 9, A dominant 9, and that these all imply the presence of a 7th of some kind, it would make sense for the half diminished to be the same, but somehow it just bothers me. A lot of this is just feeling, it's just convention. But anyway, so half diminished. So to have the half diminished, to have a minor shell, we've got the 1, the flat 7, the flat 3. Yeah, some people call half diminished minor flat 5. I really don't like that way of calling it, because minor 7 flat 5 is 2 pieces of information, whereas half diminished is just 1 piece of information. Now, it is half diminished 7th, but the moment you hear half diminished, it can only be a 7th. There is no other type of half diminished. So really, I think the 7 is kind of redundant, And I like using half diminished because instantly the hand, the brain, it just knows what it is. You've got 1, flat 5, flat 7, flat 3. And then what I've done is I've added the 9s. Now, it sounds very weird if I play it on its own, and this is like something else that I really try and encourage all my students to do a lot, which is when students start off trying to arrange jazz, a lot of the times they are in a narrow tunnel focus on the one chord they're trying to work out, and they'll try and work it out and go, ooh, that sounds absolutely horrible. No. You have to go from several chords back and go into it so that your ear has a sense of the context. It's like trying to understand a sentence where you look at one letter and go, I don't think that letter works, when you have no idea what the words are, or even the word that the letter is in. You have to bear in mind what the context is. So if I go from the second line, so suddenly that makes a lot more sense, right? Or was I just playing it wrong before? Maybe I was playing it wrong. I don't know. Anyway, or maybe my ear just no, that is the chord. That absolutely is the chord. Isn't it amazing how when you hear it out of context, it's like, ew, what on earth is that? And then when you put it in context from the beginning of that line, suddenly it's not ugly anymore. So please bear this in mind, because I have to nag my students so much about not just listening to it one chord at a time, because hopefully I've illustrated just how your ear hears it completely differently. It's like optical illusions where what you're looking at changes on what's around it. Anyway, so moving on, which I prefer to call A half diminished add 9. You could think of it as an A half diminished 9th, but I don't like that. C major 9, because you've got your 1, your 7, your 3, and then we have the 9th added as well. So we don't have to call it a C major 7 add 9. It's just long-winded. We just call it C major 9. And then here we've got this is, by the way, in the left hand, this is a really common voicing. It's called a rootless left hand voicing, but this is for a future lesson. Anyway, and ignore the melody note. Just ignore the F for the moment. Just think of this as an auxiliary note, as classical people would call it. Or an appoggiatura that resolves to the E. Just ignore the F. So we've got the 3, the 5, the 6, and the 9. There is no C, but the C is so strongly implied because we just had a chord of C. So we don't have a C, but there it is. It's just so strongly implied. C6/9/E. It's a first inversion C chord. Then here we've got a really interesting chord with 2 alterations. So extensions are the numbers above 8. Alterations are when you take the extensions and you flatten or sharpen them. You can also flatten and sharpen the 5. This is for a future lesson. Don't worry about this too much. So here we've got in the left hand the 1, the 3, and the flat 7, a G dominant 7 shell. We've got the melody on top, and so then we have a flat 9. Really the flat 9 is A flat. We have a sharp 9. Really the sharp 9 is A sharp. So, I could have written it as A flat, A sharp in the middle of it, but it's really difficult to read. In terms of functional harmony, that would make the most sense, but no one really writes it that way because it's really ugly and difficult to read to have A flat and A sharp. So here, we've just shoehorned it in as A flat and B flat because it's just so much easier to read. But really, it's a flat 9 and a sharp 9. So the left hand has the 3, the right hand has like what you could think of as a flat 3 or a sharp 9. Here it's written as a flat 3 and then the flat 9. Anyway, so now this is another one of these chords that if you just play it on its own, it's like really ugly. It's like, what is this? But if we go from the beginning of the line, it's just, it's so deliciously bittersweet, isn't it? It's lovely. And then another inversion. Bear in mind that A is still flat because of the flat earlier in the bar. Again, there is no G in this, but that G, it's so strongly implied because the chord before was a G. I will talk about how you recognise that it is a chord based on a G when there is no G there. I'll explain this in another video at a different time. Again, ignore the melody note. Just think of it as an appoggiatura to the D with a flat 9. Oh yeah, I was going to explain this. So basically, this cannot just be G flat 9. If you have an alteration, if the thing that's being altered is the first number above A, you have to put that what kind of seventh chord it is. Otherwise, if you have flat 9, it could be a minor seventh, it could be a dominant seventh. It's very unlikely that it's a major seventh, but it kind of could be. So you really need to say what kind of seventh it is before you then put that it's a flat 9. Again, this is sort of a little bit complicated to explain outside of the limited time, and I've already gone way over the amount of time that I wanted to spend. So basically, it is a G dominant seventh with a flat 9. And that's why it's not just G flat 9. G flat 9, very ambiguous. It could be several different types of seventh chords. Anyway, and then, oh yes, this is the chord that I said at the beginning of this session I was going to explain. A minor major 7 / B. Now, this might sound like advanced algebra. It's actually really not that complicated. Let's take the B at the bottom of this chord and let's just move it down to A. Now, that is just A minor major 7. Now, my students just hear minor and major stuck together, and they for some reason they keep calling it A major minor 7, which is, no, that's not what it is. Just please take this in, and if you're one of my students, even one of my students who's been with me for ages, please do just take this in and spend a while to digest this. The reason why this is called an A minor major 7 is that it is a minor triad with the interval of a major seventh, which is why it's called a minor, and think of it in your head, minor, and whisper in your head, triad, minor triad. So it's an A minor triad, major 7. So if you call it A major minor 7th, that's basically actually just a dominant 7th chord, because that's a major triad with a minor 7th, that which is like literally what a dominant 7th chord is. It is a minor triad with a major 7th, or if you leave the word triad out, A minor major 7. So think of it with that word triad in there and then just take it out. So if we have A at the bottom instead of B, it is, we have those are the notes of Stairway to Heaven, aren't they? Anyway, so 1 flat 3 5 minor triad major 7th. That is an A minor major 7. We've got a melody note, and then we've taken the A out of the bottom, put it up to the B. So it's an A minor major 7 / B. Now, hopefully, if you followed that now no longer looks totally baffling and confusing. Hopefully, you've kept up with the logic of that. Lovely chord, that. And then we go to an A minor 6/9 /E. And again, ignore the melody note, ignore the D, just ignore that. Think of this as an appoggiatura leading to this note. So we have the 1, the 9, the flat 3, the 6, and instantly we know that this is an A. It's an A minor 6. It has a 9, and then we put the fifth in the bass. We've got the E in the bass, which is leading us back to E dominant 7 with the 9s. Now, I very specifically chose this particular voicing because if you take out the E that's at the top of the left hand, so we've just got the bottom E in the left hand there, and then this voicing in the right hand. To classical musicians, this should look very, very familiar because this is everywhere. From Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, everybody in classical music uses this, and basically in classical music, this is because it resolves to A. In classical music, they will call this an A sharp diminished or an A sharp diminished seventh. In the right hand, it's basically an A sharp diminished in different inversions. So it could be in this inversion, could be in this inversion, could be in this inversion, could be in this inversion. Very, very common sound in classical music. However, really, and I find it so much more useful to think of it, that in classical music, any time that you have a diminished chord that resolves up a semitone to where it's moving to, it really is functioning as a dominant 7th flat 9. So here you have, instead of it being a G sharp diminished 7th resolving to A, here you can see that really it is an E in the bass. It is, then you've got your flat 7, you've got your flat 9, you've got your 3, you've got your 5, and then your A resolves down the 5th to resolve to A. Which is the key that we're in. So I will expand on that in a future lesson. Don't worry if you weren't completely keeping up with that. To be explored in a future session. So what's interesting, in classical music, you don't even need the E. So we could, if this was classical, and we went from these chords before, we could just do this. And it doesn't have the E, but it so strongly implies that E. Anyway, for a future session. So you can do this and go widdly, 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 widdly. And now let me just play you the whole thing all the way through, and then well done. You have made it through this, very jam-packed tutorial. So, yes, I like that, and I hope you like that and enjoyed it. I know that this was an awful lot of information to throw at people. This really is the fundamentals. The problem is that there's so much controversy and so many sort of different ways of explaining this, that just to explain the very basic fundamentals, I want to make sure that people don't get confused. So I hope I haven't confused you by trying harder not to confuse you. So anyway, do please let me know if what you thought of that. Let me know if it was useful. Let me know if it wasn't useful. Let me know if I threw too much stuff at you, too little stuff, if you disagree. And also, it would be great to have as many people see this as possible, so that if it's useful to people, that they get to see it. So do like and subscribe. And thank you so much for sticking with this all the way through, and I'll see you at the next one, where we're going to explore 11ths, 13ths, and how we combine them to make really, really juicy chords and things like altered dominants. And I will see you the next time. Thank you very much. Bye.